to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Cecily, roll call, please.
Counselor Gorley. Counselor Richards. Counselor Sanchez.
Here.
Counselor Thorstad.
Here.
Counselor Trask.
Here.
President Pro Tem Mueller.
Here.
Mayor Coleman.
Present. Let the record show that we have 5 present and 2 absent. Before we get started, I would like to start with a moment of silence because I think this is a topic that's been in discussion for decades. And I just to take in consideration the magnitude of what we're going to be discussing tonight. So just a moment of silence, please. Thank you. I'm excited to discuss this matter because it's, like I said, it's something that's been in discussion for many years. And I think it's good to pick it up and work on finalizing these ideas. So, yeah, I'm going to let staff take it away. Go ahead.
All right. We're going to start this off a little bit differently than we've done some staff reports, in that staff isn't going to talk to begin with. I'm going to do a brief introduction of what we have up on the walls and the process that we're going to use. And then you get to wander around and put in your own input. So on the walls, you can see some big papers that we have marked up. This one here says incentives/carrot. Next to it is penalties/stick. Over here, we have development standards and general appearance. And then this one says maintenance requirements. Each one, you'll notice, has a space that says other, that doesn't have any topic in it. In front of you, there are some stickers. And then near the places, there are markers and Post-it notes. And so what I would like you to do is wander around, think about our downtown, think about ways that you think it could be improved. And if there is one of those things written on the paper that appeals to you or that you think will be effective, put a dot on it. If there is something that you want to add, use a marker, add it directly to there. Or if you're not comfortable with that, write it on a Post-it note and stick the Post-it note up on the wall. The idea being to get as interactive as possible and to really get as much feedback from you without staff telling you stuff. So any questions on that? Does that make sense? And so we'll give you some time, and then after that, we'll have a presentation.
Can I add a little bit there too? So we put up some potential suggestions, like under incentives, it talks about like having utilities covered, and that would be for like new businesses that are coming in. If at any time you're looking at these and you want to talk about them, just let's start talking about them, because this is something that we want to be able to bring back, something that you all had mentioned wanting to discuss this as part of the council goals. So we want to be able to bring back something that you all stand behind. So, or at least want to discuss and have an interest in potentially going a few different directions. You have a bunch of dots in front of you. Cecily, you give multiple ones, right? So if there's something you feel really strongly about and you want to put a whole bunch of dots there, feel free. And we want this to be as collaborative as possible. So like Blair said, we're not going to be really talking, but anything that's not clear or that you want to have some conversations about, let's do it even while we're doing this activity.
So. Sounds good. One question before we continue. I just want to confirm, you all can hear me in the back? Yay.
Nice.
Yay.
All right.
Yay. Just want to say thank you to Adam. It was a long process. We waited a long time for these. Thank you for these ones. They're an upgrade from the ones that got left on the ship. So we're just grateful for you. So thank you.
I actually heard from Steve. They're still on the ship.
They're still on the ship. Crazy. Well, thank you, Adam, for all your efforts in making this happen. It was so important that people in the community can hear us all. So thank you, and let's get started. So, yeah.
Yeah, so this one over here says prohibit demo by neglect, and this is a idea that we got from Independence. They have a provision of their code that is specifically geared at preventing properties from being neglected to the point that they fall completely apart and have to be demolished. And so it specifically is aimed at making sure that the roof is maintained to some level to prevent deterioration from getting worse, making sure that that's not that the foundations are not deteriorating because of neglect, that kind of thing. Yes, yeah. And for us in particular, it's so difficult, it's so expensive to build a commercial building that, you know, once it comes down, it's the chances of it being replaced are kind of slim. And so we do need to protect what we have.
Okay. That all depends. That's one of the things that we want to discuss. Right now, we don't necessarily have required inspections for commercial buildings. And so this could be something that could be discussed to be looking for some of that. And I think the time frame could be very negotiable. It could be just if they're vacant. It could be every year. And Blair has some additional thoughts on that too.
Yeah.
Well, right now, we do have a vacant building ordinance that does require a registered vacant building. It requires the owner to regularly inspect, but it's completely on the owner. And what the city what the ordinance provides for is that we can demand proof of that inspection. It doesn't actually involve the city coming in and inspecting. We could pursue beefing up code to go that direction if that was something that we wanted to do. For existing buildings?
Yeah.
Yes,
Here in Sweet Home, and the owner said, no, you can't come on a building. He has no teeth.
My concern is empty buildings. And then we have existing businesses who are trying to bring good to the community. Buildings that would be higher present right next to them, right next to them, are attached.
Fire marshal will come down here.
Challenging.
Have enough people to do it anyway.
Hey, this building.
He's in my building all the time.
Well, okay, understandable.
Yeah.
You walked right into that.
This guy's telling me what he wants.
I don't think he, right.
Oh.
But I'm bummed.
Yeah.
Great fan for not meeting.
okay. So you've all sat down, so I guess you're done. Tell me about your thoughts as you're viewing these things. Are there other things that occurred to you as you were looking at these? Are there other items that should be brought up that that are not present? What do you think?
I can't think of anything that is not present. For me, I think the biggest concern is empty storefronts not being kept up and then just being used for tax write-off purposes. That just brings a drawdown to our community and our downtown core. So, and I think these matters, if done in a wise way, would help mitigate those.
There is some cities where there is some teeth into these stores that are being used as tax shelters and leaving empty, like we have in our town. And so I didn't quite see any of these categories that kind of fill some, I mean, there's that one somewhat, but I think that's huge because we can talk all day long about how to make downtown look beautiful. But if we can't get them to do something to these empty buildings, it's going to be a distraction of anything we do nice.
Well, I think I appreciate Director Larson bringing the potential ordinance of demolition by neglect to us, because I think that will help mitigate those empty buildings.
So I want to just ask a question, just helping to facilitate this a little bit. You're talking about vacant buildings, but we do have like some vacant building fines there, but we only have 3 dots on that. So, and you all have more dots too. I mean, you can put as many dots on there as you wanted too. So I guess my question is, before we go into that piece, are we trying to, most of the cities that I've seen have had something like a vacant building fine or a fee, but there aren't dots on there. So are you all hoping to find a solution with vacant buildings that would be different than some sort of fine?
Probably. There's probably some hesitation, probably, I can't speak for the council, they can speak for themselves, but probably some hesitation by the council and maybe staff to enforce fines, because last thing we want is businesses not coming to town or business leaving, and anti-business message we send. But on the flip side, you have to do something. If you don't do something, this will continue on forever. So there's got to be, either you give it the carrot and try to get them into them empty buildings. And if that carrot doesn't work, you're literally left with nothing else but to step up and do something, because they're just not going to do it. I can name 2 owners, and I will not name the owners, but you know what I'm talking about.
It'll be in the paper if you do.
Yeah. That they absolutely, I guarantee you, they'll never put anything in their building. They've even said so. So they're going to be empty forever until we do something to those 2 buildings.
And the city's been working on the SEEP program. Was started by Share, and then the city took it over, and we've put a lot of money into the SEEP program, a lot of money, and it's been around for a long time. So we've had the carrot there a long time, but there is backlash if you start to create fines or fees, or I guess it's fines. On the other hand, we've already given the carrot, and there's not been a response to giving a carrot to those who have empty buildings. And we might create an environment where people are concerned about coming in, but we've already created that environment by allowing buildings to sit empty, and then it looks like our business community is not thriving.
May I ask a relatively philosophical question? What do you see the role of the city in downtown? What is our role?
Leadership, but I don't think we should be placing fines on people. I'm a business owner. If you came to me, we would butt heads.
Well, and that's why I asked the question is until we know what our role is or agree on what our role is, we're not going to come to an agreement on the right way to go about.
Well,
whatever that role
in
is.
response to his discussion right there, I'm a business owner. If you came to me as a city and said, hey, you need to clean up your act or clean up your buildings or clean up what needs to be cleaned up, I would think I'd take that respectfully and do it. I mean, that's just me though. Or if work with the city to say, okay, maybe I can't afford to clean up my building, or I can't do some of the changes. Maybe we could partner with the city to figure out how we can get to that goal. But I personally look at it a little differently. I feel that if I'm doing something wrong, I would respect somebody coming to me and telling me, hey, you're doing something wrong. We need to get this cleaned up, do something to improve my business. Because actually, as a business owner, you want your business to look nice, look good. But on the flip side, you may not can afford it. So I know some of these carrots or some of this other stuff, incentives that have been posted up there, that may be the alternative. Well, we use the SEEP grant right now. That's a good program. You know, we have to look at all our options. As far as the city, I don't think our role as a city is to be police. I don't think we should be taking that role on. But on the flip side, we got to protect the city from hazards. And so when I look at some of these buildings, and I'm not mentioning a few, they absolutely would not pass fire code. They would not pass anything if they really were inspected. Right now, they're being neglected. Nobody's looking at them. And they wouldn't even pass a simple inspection. There's about 3 buildings in Sweet Home right now that if fire marshal went in or anybody with that experience went in, would probably shut them down immediately or have a field day with it because they're a fire hazard. And I know that for a fact by just knowing the buildings themselves.
What other cities have regulations for this? What do they have in place? Like Brownsville, Lebanon, Harrisburg, Junction City?
It depends on which city we're talking about. I mean, you already mentioned Lebanon has additional inspections that we don't have. Other cities like Independence have downtown standards and things like the demolition by neglect. There are multiple cities that do have things like fines for vacant buildings. And those vary. You know, you can see everything from the side of it escalating each year to it being something where if they are working on a property or they are improving a property, they're exempt from something like that. So there's a lot of different directions that cities can choose to go.
I know that Brownsville also has a downtown theme that is required and expected of them. I think that the city's role in downtown is to facilitate through infrastructure and safety, an environment that allows economy to thrive. And I think right now we know that that's not what it looks like in downtown. We have some business owners who are really working hard to make that happen. And then we have other property owners who are not. So I think we've mentioned before in discussion of this that those that are making those efforts towards improving their building, they should be exempt because they're actually working on it. Those who have chosen to sit, there's some buildings, I've been here 15 years, that have been empty since I arrived. It's a long time. And they've been given every opportunity to participate in the SEEP program. I think that fire safety is a big one. The prohibit demolition by neglect is an important thing. I would like to see a theme, but I see that others don't. And that's something that the group discussed in regards to the SEEP program when it first was set up, that there would be a theme of some sort, which you have the board back there. Oh, it's over there now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that Sharon Shedge set up. So.
If I might, is that on?
Nope.
I took a class.
Turn it.
Oh,
Push the button.
what?
Push the button.
Oh, I already thought I did that.
Oh, look, it is, you are.
Oh, okay. Turn it back on.
Turn it back on.
You did.
Okay,
Closer.
Just.
all right.
There you
So, I took a class and we got 3 businesses to let us go do their businesses so we could look and see if they had any fire marshal things that were not right. Well, we went to one of those buildings. I won't mention where it is. It was where you go and work out. So we went in there and we didn't get past the first door on the outside of that place without 3 violations. 3 before you got inside the building. We're looking through the windows. So it is important. It's very important. And a lot of it's electrical. That's what happens a lot of times. And so I think that's really important. And it should be for the employees or the people that own the things too. So
I've been in multiple buildings downtown that are empty, and it's the electrical that is the biggest concern for updating that because of the fire safety. And a lot of those were not done to code to begin with. And the electrical has been in place since the building was built. So it's ancient. So I wonder when it says include in interior projects in SEEP, if we could have specific SEEP for electrical work.
Well, and that's the type of thing that council could direct any of that to be for electrical work, for ADA bathrooms, for commercial kitchens, whatever type of pieces you all felt like was would be the most impactful for downtown. Just some examples of some of the other things that other cities have done. Some will provide larger grant programs with the idea that then you have to try to bring in a certain amount of workforce as well, which can then help with both the community as well as helping with those buildings. There's also other things, going back to Councillor Thorseth's question earlier about some of the vacant building fines and things like that. There are some programs where all of the revenue then goes back into additional grants for things like SEEP grants and so forth. There's also some other ways where you can just focus on one particular area, like electrical, and the beginning piece of something like this downtown code could be trying to get all of the buildings up to an electrical fire standard. So I think there's a lot of options in front of council, depending on what direction you all would want to go, if you want to go a direction at all.
One thing that we didn't put up on the board that I've been poking around with is looking at trying again to see if an urban renewal district is feasible. And that's something that we could put it would take some investment and take some staff time to do, but is everyone familiar with an urban renewal district? Okay.
They already have one.
We do not have one. No, the reason, what's that?
I thought we had one.
No, the reason we haven't had one in the past is because our essentially our property tax compression has kept it from being really feasible. However, it's been a number of years since it's been looked at, and it could be that the numbers have shifted in our favor. What that would do is kind of have a dedicated funding that would go toward what's within the district, assuming that would be within the downtown. So that could fund SEEP grants, that could fund infrastructure, it could fund other things to make downtown more appealing. But it is something that only would work if it's kind of out of our control whether it works or not. And so Kevin Strong at the school district actually approached me last year and offered to help and to do some calculations. So we got with the school year we got away from it, but I'll email him again and see what we can dig up.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question? So with the urban renewal, does that take away money from fire, school, library, police services?
So the way an urban renewal district works is a district is formed, and all of the properties within that district, they're from the owner perspective, there's no change. From the taxing authority perspective, the taxes received from those properties are frozen where they are. And then any increase in value after that goes into the district. So the city would be included in those taxing districts that would be affected. But the city, the fire district, the school district, essentially for those properties within that area, they would not see an increase in the property tax levies for those properties. And that increase would go into the district instead.
No, the services just wouldn't necessarily see an increase, but it would also depend on where some of those additional taxes were going. Here in Sweet Home, our taxes are already such a minimal amount that a lot of it ends up going into the county. And so the school district, our levies, and sweet home taxes would all stay the same. It's just that extra gap, if it became increased, could, instead of going into county or other places, would instead go into our district.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that the school district, because Kevin Strong at the school district was the one who brought this to my attention, or wanted to look into it more. And I knew about it before, but he brought it up again. And he actually said, look, most school districts would not necessarily be trying to help out with something like this, but he saw the potential it had for improving the community. But the other thing he mentioned is that they get all their funding, all of the funding that they collect essentially goes to the state, and then they get a percentage, an amount per pupil that they get back. And I believe for for Sweet Home, we get back more than the property tax puts in. But even if that weren't the case, it would change that amount going to the state, yes, but it wouldn't change the amount coming back from the state that we get per pupil. And so the school district essentially wouldn't really be affected, even though their tax receipts would. Oh, you're thinking enterprise zone.
Is it-
Enterprise zone is not the same
Maybe
thing.
I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay, enterprise zone is, that's
It-
what was.
Yeah,
Right,
an enterprise zone.
right.
Yeah, we have one, and that only impacts the individual property where a business comes in. If you had a big industry come in and build something, they could have their taxes abated for 5 years or so, and so they wouldn't actually pay any of that for that first period of time, and then after that, all the tax districts would get their cut. But we have that now. The last time I believe it was used was for either Radiator Supply House or McCool Millworks.
I know we've used it in the past, and
It went clear out for the,
Halsey Mill.
yeah.
Mhm.
That was I'm confused there on that. Okay.
Sure.
It's been a long time since that's been used, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a frequent flyer.
So one piece, because I noticed incentives, which is great. I mean, I think that's always something that can help with a community. Something to be aware of is the seat money is dwindling. We have spent what, 200, 300,000 already in that?
On seed projects,
Mhm.
I don't think it's up to that.
Okay.
But it's over
Around-
200.
Yeah, over 200. And there's only around 100,000 left. So one of the things that's going to be needed to look at is how to bring in additional seat funds if we want to look at trying to do additional incentives. There are some options out there, and the urban renewal
Would help.
district would definitely help with something along those lines. Additionally, there could be some potential grants and other things that could feed back into that. But right now that money is finite. So that's just something to consider as well on how you want to structure this moving forward.
I have one thing I want to add, and it doesn't really apply to any of these, but as a person that wants to start a business in Sweet Home, I think we should have a business license, even if it's free, because then you can tell them about the SEEP. You can tell them about these benefits that are available to them. But as a new business owner, you don't know anything. You don't know the code. You don't know what kind of signs you can put up. You don't know anything. And it's very vague when you go to the city because it's so extreme that they just kind of gray line it. So it'd be cool to have a packet for a new business to see what they need to do.
I was going to bring up business license as well, although this is not a discussion regarding that. Do you have business licenses in Lebanon?
No,
No,
but they do need to notify the city.
they do need to notify the city.
Yeah.
It's a topic that's been brought up a number of times and we've received pushback from it. But when people call let's say the Chamber of Commerce, when I worked there before, I could not tell people what businesses were in the community because there was no database that says what businesses are, because there's no license.
In Albany, you do. It's a requirement.
Right.
You
Most cities.
also have to mandatory, if you have any alarm system in your building, you have to pay a permit for the alarm to the city of Albany Police. So, because they respond and you gotta pay that permit. If you don't have a permit and they respond, you get fined.
I mean,
So as a new business owner, you don't know about it. A year goes down the road, police come up for a false alarm because of a spider and you get fined. That's kind of, thing.
well, the policy right now, I think it's after 2 false alarms, you get fined, but it's not a lot of money. But I agree with Josh. I think that we should have at least a business license or a business sign up, not charging the business, but just have some mandatory
Business registration.
business registration, because the bottom line is, from a fire standpoint, we want to know who owns the building. So, I mean, I could go one step further and we could probably come up with the money to support it too, not so the owner doesn't have to, but I'm all about the Knox box. I think that's another thing that probably should be considered, because last thing you know, if you got a minor fire or nothing going on in the building, once your door broke down or window broke out, because we have to inspect. So the Knox box, we can go in, turn a key, go in, and so, I mean, business license and the ability to know, who to get a hold of for emergency from fire or police.
I agree to an extent on that one. Like, I had an FFL, so I wasn't gonna let some random firefighter come into my building for any reason, because I had windows, they could see if there's a fire or not. But for general public and businesses, I think the box is key, because it could save lots of damage if they're not waiting.
And for those that don't familiar with a Knox box, they're not just somebody you can go out and get a key made and go in. That's a fire department only key access. So the only one who can get into that Knox box is the fire department.
Yeah.
Is that box, I guess help me understand, is it like a realtor box where you have a box and then there's a key inside it that you can use to open up?
Yes, but it's just a little bit fancier box. It's a heavy duty box. You can't pry it. You can't do nothing.
Okay.
If it's installed correctly, they can't get into it.
Mhm.
Only the fire department. And like you say, they go in there with a special key, and it's a special key. It's not, and you open it up and there's a key to get into the building. And I firmly believe in that. So.
Yeah, if any buildings are conjoining to each other, they're attached, then all the businesses' keys would be in that one box. You wouldn't have a box for every address.
Right. So you could have businesses join together for the cost of that box.
Yes.
You're talking $300.
Oh, yeah. Well, for some, it's enough.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
some can't afford that. I mean,
Sure.
I understand that, but it's not like thousands of dollars. It's
Right.
Something I didn't write down on the general appearance, but I've been thinking about is, it's kind of random, but we have a lot of wires in town and wondering if we can just have our businesses that offer whatever, bury their wires downtown.
So, like power lines and
Power
communication
lines,
lines?
communication lines.
It is expensive.
Mhm.
And most of those are, at least the most expensive ones are Pacific Powers lines.
Right.
So there are communities, excuse me, there are communities that pursue undergrounding. And our rules are basically, if you have a new development, they have to be underground, but if there's existing overhead poles, then you don't. That's certainly something we could pursue from a development standpoint. It is very expensive.
It, if you try to bury a phone or telephone or a electric line, you're gonna have to dig a big hole. It's gotta be 6 feet deep. And if you put something in there and then you're gonna put the phone and the TV or whatever on top of it, you have to put a space between it. And then it can be 3 feet or even maybe 18 inches. But it is not cheap. I mean, it is millions and millions of dollars.
So One thing that could be done is we could pursue putting in conduit. Whenever the street is open, whenever we're already doing work, we could pursue a policy of you put in the conduit at that time, and that way someday down the road, you have a bunch of conduit and you can thread the wires through. But it's certainly something that we could look into.
And if I can add to that, that's not an uncommon thing for cities to work on doing. And there's even at times some fire mitigation funds that can help to cover that cost as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, not just for general appearance purposes, but also for fire safety purposes. So if we're talking about wildfires, which we've been doing lately, it's just an idea. So,
and particularly when you're looking at hardening a community, to try to look at fire safety, particularly in one that's heavily wooded, that is one of those areas that's looked at. Absolutely.
If I might circle back to the business registration idea or business licenses, I'm hearing that there's interest in it. You'd want it to be low or no fee. Are there any other provisions that you would want to have in something like that? Any other, well, because obviously a fee is of concern. Are there any other parts of what's typically associated with a business license that you are worried about or want to make sure that we promote?
No,
You can offer, but it'd be a voluntarily thing too, is once they're willing to do a fire plan. So what that means, if they say, no, I don't want to do it, then they don't need to, I mean, it shouldn't be mandatory, but offer them the opportunity to do a fire plan. For that fire plan is for us knowing the building. It's just a drawing of the building so we know where, not so much the contents of the building, but the rooms, doorways, and things. Because if we have a structure fire, that is huge. So that might be an option, but only volunteer if they want to do it or not.
City of Albany only charges $10.
For their business licenses?
Yeah. I just wish that they would put more information in there, some of the basic codes, because, starting a business, you want to put up flags, you want to put up signs, you want to put all this stuff up. Everybody has their own codes and regulations, and so you don't know. Right? So it'd be cool to have like a little pamphlet in there, like,
this is what you need to start up. This is what you need to know to start up a business.
Yeah. And here's what we have to offer to help you pay for those things that you're going to do.
I like that idea a lot.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So we brought up this business registration license a while back and it was not well received. So I'm curious to know what has changed to, I guess, encourage it now compared to what it was. Because we had brought forth some options. And so I'm encouraged. We've been talking about this forever. It would make things easier. So
I've been a proponent of it ever since. But I think where the hesitation was the fees, charging the owner money. I think that's where the hesitation came from the council.
Also, Councilor Thorstad's relatively new. So, yeah, I think the idea came up before Councilor Thorstad was on the council.
No, it came up with my idea.
No, and it had, it's encouraging that this is being brought around again. So I just want
As a business owner, I wouldn't have a problem with $10. But there's some business owners that they can't afford it. So I'm not going to speak for all. But I think a business registration of some sort, whether free or $10, should be in place.
Well, I think we did have a mess because the people in town did not want to touch that at all. And it was only $5. I think it was $5. And they just blew up. And maybe we didn't give them the stuff that they needed to know that we didn't give them that would have helped. Maybe we could do that differently. I don't know if we did it good enough. Let's put it that way. But it is a good idea. It really is.
Well, it's funny because I think I only heard from one business owner that didn't like the idea. And whenever I've heard this topic come up, it's been from other business owners. All the business owners I've communicated with like the idea, except for the one who you heard from. So
It's unusual to not have a business license or business registration in this.
You have to pay $10 to run for office. Just saying.
Well, and I do get calls, and I still get calls of people saying, you know, how much does their business license cost? How do we do the license? It's like, well, we don't have one. Well, you don't? Everybody else does. I mean, I get that question
Yeah.
constantly. So,
We actually have to issue weird letters to people too sometimes that because we don't have one, their lender or some other business partner will require some proof. And we have to put out a letter that says, yes, we don't actually have one. These people are legit, according to our knowledge, and that's it.
My friends who own businesses in other areas end up being suspicious of Sweet Home because we don't have one.
Counselor Sanchez, it keeps looking like you want to try to say something and you haven't.
Do you really want to hear what I have to say? I'm just deeply troubled that we're considering barriers to businesses and raising fees in this state of economy and inflation and interest rate. I think it's a terrible idea to try to enact any sort of additional regulations on struggling businesses in town. So that's what I feel.
So since this is just a workshop and we're trying to work through that, can you, like, what specifically?
Just additional requirements.
Like the business registration?
If we wanted to delegate somebody within the city to look on the Secretary of State website, you can find every Sweet Home business. I know it's time consuming, but it's also, in my opinion, a hardship to businesses to do additional paperwork, especially for businesses such as mine, where I have to do a ton of paperwork on a consistent basis that I already struggle with. So the $5 for a license, or the have to get a fire plan, or the have to get new windows, or the have to do this, or the have to do that. It's like we're already struggling retaining businesses and bringing in businesses. So I'm more of the incentive type of person instead of a regulation type of person.
If we give them an option, how could that cost them? If we just have them fill out a form, if we help them fill it out a form or whatever, it would make sense to me that it's not going to cost any, just a little time to fill out that form, would be my guess. And you're absolutely right. It would help people, you know, especially the fire department in the city. They know where everything is, but some of that's not. And so I just think, I don't know why that could be a bad idea. It's not going to cost them anything as far as $5 or whatever it's going to be. I don't know.
I don't think they need to charge for just basic information on the business. When I think at 2 a.m. if your structure's on fire, I'm not going to call the Secretary of State to figure out who's owning the building. So I think that we need to know who's in the building so we can get in there and put the fire out and call the responsible party to call them. A lot of times we don't know who it is.
So if I may, if somebody rents a building, it doesn't mean they're the owner of the building. I think that we know who the owners of every building are in this town already. And then a $5 form could take an employee $25 an hour to fill out and drive and mileage and fuel and whatever additional costs that you have to have for your employee to fill out a piece of paper, plus the taxes on top of that. A little $5 fee goes to $40. I mean, just little nickel and diming of businesses is just, it's hard to hear.
I would just like to say, I think that we might know the property owners, but I can say that when you have staff at the fire district, they may not know the owners when they're on call and on duty. Last night, an ambulance was called and the ambulance didn't know the new housing development, so didn't arrive in the right place because it's new to them. So we might know property owners, but I would say the fire district knows property owners. I think that we don't want to put barriers, but at the same time, we do want to encourage a thriving business community. And having a registration, I think, is beneficial to people knowing who's in business in the community, who am I competing against. Competition is a good thing for businesses. who do I call if I want to have concrete done? Oh, this person actually does concrete. And most people in the community would call the city or the chamber and not look it up on the Secretary of State. And we could have a staff member do that, but that would be rather cumbersome because then you have to constantly update that. But if it's something that's required in many other communities, people know to expect to, it might be a requirement in our community. They'd be likely to contact City Hall and say, what's your registration process or your business license? How do I go about that? It's something that people already know to do, which then that updating happens because a business owner is interested in coming to the community. We can offer help with the registration, but I think having them registered actually is a huge asset to them and to the community members as well.
We periodically get have people to counter ask us for recommendations of a local company, and we unfortunately are not able to give out direct recommendations. We can usually only say, well, we've gotten applications from these people. But if we had a business registry to direct people toward and say, here are the people who all do business in Sweet Home, we try to direct people to the chamber, but the chamber doesn't. People don't have to be a member of the chamber.
Correct.
And so there's not there's a lot of folks that do business in town that simply aren't, we don't have any way of directing people their way.
No, the chamber costs quite a bit of money.
Yeah, there's that
So
too.
we're offering a free service, helping businesses with free services. It's not an obligation to a new business, is what I said. So
There's a couple different ways if council decides that you want to pursue something like this too. You could start with a voluntary business registration that could then eventually become something that was mandatory, but it could become a phased process. We actually already have software through OpenGov that's fantastic as far as business licenses are concerned. So people could even do that form if we set that up on their phones or on their computers, so they wouldn't have to drive down. Just there are some ways to make it a little bit easier. The other piece that would be nice is if that something like that happened, it could then get reported out to agencies that are looking to provide technical assistance or grant funding or things along those lines. Right now, there's no mechanism in Sweet Home to provide that information. And so there's definitely a lot of things I think to consider that could be real benefits to businesses to do that, and wouldn't need to cost a business anything. So.
Well, when I was working at the Capitol during the pandemic, I'd have to say that was probably one of the hardest things because I was getting news constantly of grants and things that are available to small business owners and trying to figure out who to contact in Sweet Home and making sure I knew everybody to contact. It was not an easy thing. If I would have had a registration, we could have just gone through the whole list and contacted all of them. But I was relying on people to help communicate that. And I think it's a huge benefit to our community to say, hey, sign up. And I think it's important that they sign up. It's not a hindrance. It's actually a value to them.
We went a little off topic here, but maybe that's something we could bring back at a later council meeting and sort of discuss a little bit more and see where everyone's at with that. Back to the downtown standards. So just to kind of echo what Director Larson was saying a little bit with what is our role as the city and what is the council's role? And we are bringing up this particular workshop because it was the request of council, and this was one of council goals, was for us to establish some of these pieces. But we don't have to go too quickly either. We can come up with something that is really basic that we can build upon in the future if that's a way that council wants to go. But I think sort of the question is, what do we want to look at and what do we want to start developing? Is this something that council is still interested in, or is this something that we put on the back burner for now? I mean, I definitely see interest in incentives. I know there's been a lot of discussion on how do we protect our more historical buildings and what we currently have. I know there's been talk about themes, and then there's also talk about fire safety, but where are we at? Do we want to keep going? Do we want to table this?
I think I'm very interested to know where the council stands, as this is a topic that gets brought up frequently. And obviously, Sweet Home gets compared to Sisters frequently. Sisters, Brownsville, those communities, I don't know about Lebanon, have downtown standards. And that's why we get compared to them, is that standards are there. Now, I don't think we need to be heavy-handed in any way and wouldn't want to be. But to come up with guidance for businesses, if that's what we want to do, let's do it. If we're not going to, if that's something we don't want to do, I'd love to just put this to bed, if that's where people are at.
I agree with our mayor regarding that, but we've got 4 landowners who, unless we get them to come to the plate, they're never going to do anything to their building. They're using their buildings as tax shelters. And no matter what you do for standards, no matter what you talk about on everything else, until they decide to put people in those buildings, they're going to be empty. And there's 4 owners that are absolutely not going to do anything. We got to bring them to the plate.
So just if I can, well, actually, all of you talk first, but if we're saying to bring them to the plate, that's going to either need to be something that they voluntarily choose to do, or that's going to be something that council puts something in place that forces them to. And so I think that's part of the question as well, as what do you all want to do where that's concerned? Because
2 of the 4 have absolutely told me directly they will not do anything to their buildings.
Counselors, your thoughts on design, what are we calling this? Design standards, downtown standards. Are we going to pursue this idea, or you guys want to put it to bed?
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Mhm.
So the thing that is also difficult for me is that we currently have an empty building right now that we're not doing anything with. And so if we're requiring people to do something with their empty buildings, it would be nice if we were also doing something with our empty buildings. So I think that's my first issue. The second issue is I don't see a role for government to tell private business or private owners what they can and can't do with their property.
Any other counselors? I think that the government often tells people what they can and cannot do with their private property. But you all need to make a decision about this, because if people are concerned about empty storefronts, and I guess clarification would be helpful. Which building are you referring to that we're not doing anything? Okay, the one that we have painted and worked on updating the exterior.
can I make some comments about that? There isn't any, their fire district is currently using that building.
Mhm.
And so it's not actually vacant. But beyond that, we have been in discussions because the fire district isn't sure if that they want to continue using it. And so we actually have a tenant already potentially lined up for that.
Yeah, I don't know of any government facility that we haven't pursued to put somebody in that building at all. And we've aggressively tried.
Mhm.
And we actually hope to bring in some things no, probably not our next council meeting, but the following one.
Is there any way to have these 4 owners come to council and put it on the record that they don't want to do anything with it?
I don't think we have any subpoena power.
We don't.
Can we ask them, like,
We have sent a letter to owners regarding the potential of doing a empty building ordinance before. And that's when we heard from 2 business owners, property owners, or just the one. And that's the only real communication we had face to face with them regarding their empty storefront. So we've pursued multiple different avenues regarding empty storefronts in the downtown core.
One of them hasn't paid their taxes in about 3 years. I think it's going to take care of itself here real soon for at least one of them.
I don't know what I want to do, but when government comes into my building, it really irritates me.
But see, you have a business and you're being active in a community. And
Exactly.
so we're trying to
I-
avoid going into
yeah.
business fronts with
Yeah,
active. Yeah.
That's where
Yeah. We're referring right now to just the empty ones where they're not doing anything with it. We wouldn't want to come into your business because we're grateful you have a business as a small business owner.
it's tough for me.
Okay, so I'll just be very, very candid here. So this is one of those topics that various council members talk to me about on a regular basis, and they want to know what can we do about the vacant buildings? How can we bring in businesses? How can we do other various things? And we have been doing, we have the SEEP grants. We have been having meetings like this. We have downtown standards meetings. We had a share meeting earlier. We are doing everything we possibly can to bring in businesses. And there are some businesses that are coming in. With the way that our current codes are, there is no teeth, no mechanism to change any of that with those vacant buildings. So that is one of those things where council really does need to make a decision on either let it be what it is and recognize that it is up to those property owners to then bring in businesses. And if those buildings continue to deteriorate, that is the choice of those property owners, or for council to decide to change something that would then not allow those businesses to stay empty or to deteriorate. Staff doesn't really have an option to change much, and staff is doing everything that they can. I have no interest in having staff spend a lot of time on creating additional downtown standards if council or on vacant building issues, because we already have a lot going on if council doesn't direct us to do so. So the point of this meeting is really, where are you all at? Because I think it's time to, fish or cut bait here. So I just wanted to go ahead and be very completely candid there, because this has been an ongoing conversation for a really long time. And it doesn't mean that if you all do put this to bed, that a few years from now you can't pick it back up. But for right now, I think we need to decide where we want to spend our energy.
And I think if we choose to cut bait, we need to make sure that the community knows that the council chose to cut bait, that the council made a decision to not do anything about downtown businesses. And we need to take that on our shoulders, honestly. We've got to be willing to do that.
If I might, Greg, you remember when we had that meeting about charging people by the square foot or something for buildings that were not being used, and that was shot down too. And so this is kind of crazy stuff. That's, that I understand that some people in the businesses here don't have an awful lot of money, but still, it's like giving them money from the seats for doing their stuff on the inside of the building. I don't think I'm going to do that. But I think some of these things we're talking about, I think we should look at.
As far as the SEED grant, I personally think it's been a great program. As a small business, I've taken advantage of it. I think for an interior, depending on what we're talking about from an interior, I could be open to some things in the interior. Electrical is one of them, because I know electrical, roof, there's some things that are holding up, somebody from moving forward. The buildings that they absolutely, there's one in particular that it doesn't, if they don't know that person, like if they're not their brother, sister, their aunt or uncle, won't rent it because of that reason, then maybe we approach from a city standpoint, we guarantee their lease or guarantee some kind of a protective in place. That's what the case is. But there is a couple that have verbally said they're not going to do anything to their building. It's a tax shelter. And I don't think we should let those buildings just sit empty forever. So I think that we need to have some kind of teeth on some of those that are sitting empty permanently. But I like what everything you guys are talking about. I think we should move forward personally, but
Can we move forward on some of the easy ones, like the incentives, the carrot, some of the
Certainly.
little ones?
None of these are required, so,
And I think
Well,
maybe
we'll
we
move
should
forward
have
on
like,
whichever ones we want.
public, input on what the city people want to do with the empty buildings. It's not our decision. It should be the people's decision. If they want to do something, we can hear for what they want to say.
The SEEP stuff is still going forward, right? We're not stopping applications. We are low on funds on that. We need to continue conversations on how we would fund that, especially since it would have to come from our general fund. But that's still going forward, right? Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we certainly have ways of getting public input that we could pursue to find more.
So, Mr. Snyder, are you suggesting a survey on what people think about doing an ordinance or doing something about the empty storefronts? Yeah. I just want to make sure it was on record.
So, Madam Mayor, if I may,
Mhm.
the problem that I have and what I'm hearing is that there's 4 property owners and it's like targeting 4 property owners. And that's really hard. I'm not opposed to the ordinance change for demolition by neglect. But the targeting is pretty hard.
How many empty storefronts do we have downtown?
It's hard to quantify because some
I know we
are
counted at one
some are
point.
truly vacant, some are technically used but just look vacant. Offhand, I'd say we have 20.
That's
I
around
thought
the
it was
number.
like 18 or 20.
That's.
Yeah.
I want to make it clear, I'm not targeting people. But there's a point where you got to do something with these empty buildings. And if when they literally tell you, no matter what, I'm not going to do anything with these buildings. You got to figure out how to get them to do something with their buildings or they'll stay empty forever.
Certainly any ordinance or regulation that the city put in would be generally applicable to everyone. And so I don't think we would, I mean, there's no way we would actually craft something that would literally target. Clearly there are some properties that are more of a problem than others, but I think everything would apply equally to all those commercial properties.
Our conversations before regarding the empty storefronts discussed the potential of, well, who's going to be fixing, if they're fixing their building up, they're exempt. And there's a time frame. It's not like, oh, it's empty and now you are under this ordinance. So there's usually some grace involved in that, an extended time period.
Anything we did would be a blank slate when it comes to how do you want it crafted and how severe do you want it and so forth. Certainly there's a number of exemptions that I wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward without. If if you have an active building permit, there's really no reason why you should be penalized further. If you just recently had someone move out of your building, I don't think there's any reason to have any kind of regulation affecting that property for at least the first year, because it takes a while to get a commercial tenant in. They don't just turn around as fast as residential does. So certainly there's plenty of opportunities, I think, to be extremely light-handed and be very focused on what the problem actually is when it comes to a vacant space that has been vacant for 15 years or more. So certainly a lot of those things could be added, and anything that worries you, I think, can be included in an ordinance or a policy that would protect business owners from abuse.
So what happens if there's businesses in places existing that have issues and suddenly they're displaced because they can't get up to date?
This wouldn't display, so
This is solely for vacant only.
Right.
That, the vacant only piece would be solely for
Okay.
vacants only,
Yeah.
yes.
now, if you're talking about any of the other maintenance obligations or things like that, we don't do that right now. If we were to move forward with something like that, you could certainly include in the ordinance something to protect current tenants or something like that. Or have just a very specific way that it actually gets triggered. Where if it's a genuine safety issue where if the fire chief isn't comfortable with the public being in a place, well, maybe we shouldn't have the public in that place and have that very stringent standard be applied. But it's wide open for whatever you would like it, however you would like it to be crafted.
So what I'm hearing, and just tell me if this is accurate, is that I don't think any of us in Sweet Home would ever want to be very heavy-handed or have too many government regulations. That's part of why we're in Sweet Home. But that being said, there's some potential interest in the demolition by neglect. Is that accurate? Can I just see a share of hands that you're at least open to discussing that? Okay. There's some definite interest in additional incentives and trying to support our community by building up. There's interest in business registration, but that requires further discussion. And there's possible interest in looking at vacant building discussion. I don't think we're there yet to talk about what that would be, but that there is an interest in coming up with a way to make it so that those who are ongoing businesses or property owners who have shared intent to possibly keep those properties empty to be able to discuss that further. Is that correct? Or do we want to put that piece to bed?
Wouldn't this demolition by neglect cover that?
It could. It really could.
Kind of.
It's possible. It depends on the property,
Mm-hmm.
on the condition of the property.
Anyone disagree with that?
I think we can have a discussion. Yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to put this to bed, to be totally honest with you too, because it's all feeling like a lot of work. But at the same time, if you all are open to talking about it, I do think it has an opportunity to make a really positive difference in the community if done the right way.
What's the lowest hanging fruit on that list? Because it's not a long list.
So incentives are already kind of there. We can talk about some additional ways to bring in some funding in the future, particularly if there are some grant pieces. This one is a fairly low-hanging fruit because we could pass something and then determine exactly how to put it into action or just discuss it as it currently is, make sure that everyone's comfortable with it. And that in a lot of ways could tie in to some of the things that we already have in code. And again, as you're looking at incentives, that's one of those pieces that always could evolve and be adapted to what our community needs. So particularly if we're able to find some additional funds, then some of those discussions like, would we want it to go towards electrical with SEEP grants and things like that? In doing so, that could also mitigate some of the other concerns that we're
Fire
already
safety.
seeing with the maintenance requirements, particularly with fire.
Right.
And so it's both sides while being an incentive and not something that I think would be cumbersome. I think it would be a welcome gift to our community.
I firmly believe that we get these owners quit using their buildings as tax shelters, incentivize them with everything we have available to them, and if they can put people in their empty buildings and change their mindset, this town pretty fast will have a 360 change, only for the positive. And then we don't think we necessarily have to be heavy handed, but we're just going to have some tough conversations and see if we can persuade them some way. But that's going to be up to other powers to be to do that.
There have been some really good wins in downtown Sweet Home lately, and I just want to tip my hat to that fact that we've had some property owners who have improved their buildings and have then rented those buildings out. So I'm excited about the multiple businesses that will be opening up in the next couple months in the downtown core. And so there's some good wins there. So we're making progress. We know that there's some businesses that are, or some property owners who've dug in their heels, but the rest of them are really coming along.
You can't say that. I mean, Mayor, you're absolutely 100% correct. And those property owners you're talking about, they have pride and ownership in their community.
Yeah.
And they've had it for a long time. That's why you're seeing it.
And
And
we
a-
have some new businesses coming in.
Yeah,
So,
some new property owners and some new
Right.
businesses, but they've, I know a number of them have taken advantage of that seat program. So just want to say good job for keeping that up.
One favor I might ask of the council, if I may. Staff, a lot of what we're talking about today with property owners is very much relationship based. And as staff members, we do work hard to have good relationships with people in the city. It is not an easy game. And a lot of times people don't have to talk to us, and often aren't willing to talk to us. And so we will continue to do the best we can to develop those relationships. But I encourage all of you as, you know, I hate to use a dirty word, but politicians is actually what you are. So, you know, that's a political game, the relationships. And so I encourage you to exercise those muscles and then let us know how we can coordinate with you with any of those conversations you have with other people in the community.
I was speaking with some of the new business owners on Saturday at the safety fair, and I just want to say they had good things to say about the staff and the interactions they've had with you. So thank you for helping them along the way, Director Larson.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Okay.
Do you have a good summary of what it seems like the council would, the direction we'd like to go?
Well, okay, so what it sounds like to me, and again, we've gone a few different places. We do like the incentives, so trying to push that as much as we possibly can. And then looking at the demolition by neglect, and possibly that would include something with vacant buildings. But I think that warrants further discussion in general, but then also talking about a potential business registration program as well. So did I miss anything? Those seem to be the three that are the most.
A survey from the public on what they want to do with downtown.
On what they, okay, so a survey on what they want to do with downtown. Meaning, because we already have,
We have people that complain about empty buildings. We have
Mhm.
people that don't care. We have people that
so just,
blame the city for the empty buildings. We have people all over the place running, never mind, I won't use those words, but could we get some input from the, if it's like overwhelming, like 70% of the population wants something done with downtown buildings, then we have that.
okay, so you want a survey regarding empty buildings?
Yes.
Okay, that we can put out and see what happens from there. I know a lot of the community doesn't necessarily understand that this is private property and that we're not in control of what type of businesses come in, or even if businesses come in. So that might be a good educational piece as well.
I agree.
Cool. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to mention as part of this workshop?
Madam Mayor, may I?
Yeah.
I'm still very interested in SEEP money for interiors. So if we could find more money or spend more money or offer more money, I know that there's businesses that would like to come in, but there's barriers because they have to upgrade and they're not really willing to spend 40,000, 60,000, whatever on somebody else's building. We could potentially offer some sort of interior seat money to where those businesses could come into town with some help to do the inside.
I think that was, yeah, communicated all around. Yep.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the other issues is that the one building that had been open to be renovated was expensive, and then the other buildings, people weren't interested in allowing them in. So, yeah. But we'll get there, and we are getting there. So we're excited, right? We have businesses opening up. Into the Brew opens up on July 4th. So watch for that one. And then you guys said another business is coming soon, a couple more.
Yes.
Does Taylor have a name?
Tailor Made Cakes.
Is that the
And-
name of the cafe? That's her
um,
current.
Carl Hogan.
Carlo Hogus.
And Carlos is about to
Mhm.
open too. So
Yep.
there's about 3 businesses that all plan on opening in early July. So
That's good.
it's very exciting.
Let's make sure we support them.
And Domino's.
Domino's.
Yeah, I don't know what their timeline is.
Yeah.
At least
and
the building's
They were
there.
talking to me. They also were mentioning July. So hopefully we'll have 4.
We'll see what happens. That'll be exciting. So. All right. Well, then I'll wrap this meeting up at 6:48.